This is Find Your Flow, a show about navigating the complexities of life and business through the lens of curiosity. I'm your host, Angelique, and I bring together experts to deliver responsibly curated conversations and perspectives that aim to progress people and the planet.
Performance of any kind. The external labels that I built my entire identity on were broken, crumbled to the core, and I was left with all of the pieces of who I used to be and unsure how to rebuild. So as I recovered for several months, I made a resolution to help rebuild my identity. I decided that in order to heal the way I saw myself, I had to start by the way that I saw and spoke about others. I would start describing people not by their labels, but by three things: their attitude, the way that they treat others, and what makes them uniquely beautiful. Instead of describing my roommate as an engineer, I would first tell you that she is a kind, intelligent, adventurous girl who loves her family deeply. The more I started equating other people's identities towards their internal characteristics, the more I began to build a healthier foundation for myself, seeing individuals and myself not for what they do, but who they really are.
So the voice that you just heard is none other than our guest today, KELSEY O'Connor. She is a former D1 softball player and social work graduate from North Carolina State University and is an advocate for mental health resources for athletes. Today, she's going to be sharing her personal experiences of navigating performance, brain injuries, and mental health. By highlighting the remarkable resilience and the renewal that have shaped her path, she continues to inspire others through her work in social work, in her speaking engagements, and far beyond. So welcome, KELSEY. I'm so grateful to have you today. I have to say, listening to your talk at the commencement ceremony was absolutely inspiring. And the part that I played was one that captured me most. That is such an interesting perspective that, we encounter every day when someone's like, hey, nice to meet you. Okay, what do you do? And so often we're categorized by what it is that we do and what we studied, whereas there's so much more to who we are. So I loved that you were able to capture and articulate that so beautifully and eloquently in your talk. And I'd love to learn more. Set the stage for us. Literally, what brought you to that moment? And give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here, and thank you for the kind words. It was kind of crazy. I was not expecting to speak at graduation. It was kind of something where my family had helped me so much when I was struggling with some speech problems and recovering from my injury. And so as we were planning for graduation, some of them weren't able to come to my smaller departmental graduation. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, maybe I'll apply to speak at the bigger one because I would love for it to be something personal. Like I would just kind of feel bad if they came to the big one and that was all they saw. And so I'm just going to apply. And I think that would be so cool. What a cool way to honor them. And so I wrote the speech and I auditioned it, and then I was chosen, and I was so freaked about it. I was even curious if I should say no. I was like, oh my gosh. So just kind of a really crazy thing, getting there and getting to the stage. But yeah, so now I'm speaking.
Like that. Yeah, I was going to say back up a little bit and tell the audience more about what started that journey. So you mentioned the injury and you mentioned that path. Help us learn more about that.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I actually suffered from 3 concussions. And so when I was headed into college, I had kind of already had some background with it. And I got to NC State. And NC State was my dream school. I got recruited to play softball there. And in the beginning, it was just everything that I dreamed of and more. I loved being a student athlete. I loved waking up early. I loved every single thing about it. And then my junior year was just really difficult. We had kind of had some stuff going on in the program itself. And so kind of at the same time that I was injured, I was kind of trying to advocate for some mental health things going on in our team. And it was just even starting to just become difficult to get excited to play and to be out there. And then I was injured. So I was at practice and I was running from first base to second base. Our coach hit a ball to the pitcher. It was a routine double play. And so as I was sliding into second base, our shortstop came through the baseline. And so as she was coming through the baseline, her full body knee first just went straight into my face. So it was a really brutal injury. And it was kind of like in that moment, I had 3 pretty bad concussions before. And it was just immediately, I just knew that it was different. It was throbbing. It was horrible. And yeah, so I mean, kind of this dream school, like just pouring my life into softball. And I think having been through softball with COVID, like everything was so narrowed into collegiate softball because we were doing online and you weren't really allowed to socialize very much. And so softball was like my whole world, growing up and then in college. And then, I was so proud of it. So it was just my everything. And so to kind of have that injury, it just really, really shattered me a lot. So yeah, so it ended up being more of a head injury mixed with a jaw injury and a neck injury. And so pretty much my world kind of flipped. I'd gone from practicing every day and being this great athlete and hanging out with my teammates to I was seeing 6 different doctors. I was really struggling in school, which was something that I had also kind of prided myself on and had to lean back on because I knew softball wasn't going to last forever. College was the last I was going to be playing softball. So of course I had really poured into what I was going to do after. And that to me was going to be social work and potentially writing and some bigger things that I had in mind. But when I had the injury, some of the cognitive symptoms were unlike anything that I had experienced before. And so I really struggled a lot to speak without stuttering. I had like a late onset kind of stutter.
Okay.
I had emotional outbursts at my family. Like it was just kind of crazy. And what ultimately ended up happening with kind of the athletic department and the softball team was it was just met with some unkindness for sure. There was a lot going on mental health wise around our softball team. And so when I had the injury and I was kind of going through all of these things, the response was that I was faking the severity of my injury and I was being selfish. And so kind of all at once, it was really my dream, my community, my abilities, like all of these things at one time were done because I ultimately had to medically retire. And then obviously just the environment wasn't good for me to get better when it's not being supported. And so, yeah, so it took about a year, which is crazy. I mean, from the time that I hit the stage to the year before, I was just a completely different person. I had just lost softball and I had lost my friends who were on my team and I lost my community. And just NC State had been this place that I just woke up every morning, like truly romanticized every morning because I loved the campus and the trees and I wore my student athlete gear every day, like walking stereotype because I just loved it so much. And it like totally flipped to this place of pain. And I was still surrounded by, all these people that were living, on and carrying on with softball without me. And it was just such a difficult time, trying to recover and find a reason to keep going. And what ended up being really beautiful about the whole thing though, is the last year of school, I ended up, trying to put myself out there and stay at NC State and make the best of it. And I really was able to kind of separate the athletic department and this really painful experience in those 3 years with how amazing my professors were. And they helped me stay in school because I was really close to having to drop out or having to take a year off or, really delay my time. And they worked with me. My family worked with me, and I would write papers and they would help me when I like stopped mid-sentence or I just was not making sense. And they sat with me and they were patient and I ended up making friends. And so what just happened is I had so much pride for the school again and tried to make something beautiful and tried not to define my college experience as totally bad or, this missed opportunity and this really amazing year came out of it. So by the time I was applying to speak for NC State, like I did have so much love for the social work department and someone had really worked with me on fixing, the things I was struggling with, cognitively and academically and things like that. So
Right.
there's a lot of community and love and supportive people who were the reason that I even had the courage and confidence to, I don't know, to stay in school, let alone, speak on behalf of the school. So.
Right. Right. My goodness. My goodness. What a story. And, I'm so sorry to hear you went through something like that when, it's the physical pain, the emotional pain, the mental pain, all wrapped into one, especially something that you held so close together as your identity. And it sounds like there was a lot of grief that surrounded that, grief that, you had to reinvent yourself, find new ways to be inspired. And it sounded like community and your family was the biggest outlet that you were able to lean into and really helped you thrive and find this resilience. I mean, even enough so where, how you talked about working in social work, wanting to bring your experience to others and help them triumph in the face of adversity or grief, and shifting identities in that perspective. So as you were going through this and, not to say on the other side of it, I know that there's still so much of, growth that comes from things like this. What were some of the maybe top takeaways of the experience and how you want to use it to inspire others?
Yeah. So, I mean, even what you said about just identifying and like re-identifying myself, a lot of that came from this inspiration to scale the love that my family had for me. And I think one of the things just about connecting with people and helping them, go through transitions of their own is like
Right.
when I was having a really hard time, my family lived really close. And so I could pick up the keys and I could go to my family, and they saw me as KELSEY and this full person. And I think it really came from being so low when I was recovering, and I just felt like I had nothing to offer. Like I wasn't getting, the same grades, and I wasn't performing well. So I wasn't, athlete KELSEY, and I wasn't, fun, happy KELSEY either, because I was just not even present. And so I felt like I literally had nothing to offer, and my family still loved me anyways. And they like just still saw, me. And I really had to realize that I might not be the same version of myself. Like you don't know if you're going to recover and be the same person, but kind of deciding like I could still be a great version of myself, even though I might not be my old self. And so really trying to do my best of just like, what can I offer the better I get? Can I be kind to other people? Can I try to just smile at other people? Can I do something really nice for, people in my community, and trying to just offer whatever it was that I had, personality wise, because that's really the minimum of what I could offer. And then just that continued to snowball. And now, of course, I'm recovered. And so I just feel this huge inspiration to, help other people that are experiencing that phase of it, and just that kind of really swallowing, confusion and hopelessness. So, I mean, it's been incredible. I've talked to people that have had their own brain injuries, or I've talked to athletes that are really struggling, or people that are struggling because they were in the corporate world for 30 years and now they don't have their job and they don't know what to do. Right. Or like people from all walks of life. It's incredible that I've reached out after the speech. I think the takeaway is just like identifying myself beyond what I'm doing. It sounds cliche, but it just really was true. Like if I had to, describe myself to you and not tell you that I was a graduate or an athlete, like I could tell you what kind of person I am. Right. Just kind of taking away of how much I also ask other people, what they do, and ask them about their job. I mean, I still do it sometimes, and then I catch myself and things like that. So I would just say, I think the two takeaways was one, just like always being able to offer kindness. Like even when I couldn't perform, that was something that I always had the ability to offer, and like taking responsibility for that, like just being kind to the people. And then number two, just really actively, like if I couldn't do it to myself first, I really struggled to re-identify myself. So I tried to see it in other people, kind of like I described. And that was just genuinely something that I wanted to do with my mom or my brothers, and say, the reason they're so wonderful has nothing to do with their occupation and what they're doing for me. They're just amazing people, and they support in different ways. And so if you can't do it for yourself, like start with other people and be such a safe person that you're able to then start to be that for yourself.
That's huge. Be a safe person for somebody else. Wow. That's, I mean, I love how you correlate that with the idea of, removing the occupation and focusing on the values of the human being. And, that's a tough thing for anybody to step back and really consider, because I think a lot of people tie their worth to their work. And, that could be as a student athlete, that could be as a, literally as your job. It could be, even if you were thinking about like stay-at-home moms, or, there's so many different occupations that tie it to that aspect, versus thinking about who you are as a human and how you want to show up and those values. What are some ways maybe I'll just start because I've seen this recently. But when you get into those conversations and you say, "Hey, what's your name?" before saying, "What do you do?" Someone suggested the idea of maybe asking another question like, "What's exciting in your world?" So what
I
are
love
some
that.
other, right? It's fun because it's, that kind of bridges open a conversation of, seeing more about what excites this person and what goes on. And maybe they're an artist at heart. Maybe they, there's so many different things, but what are some other maybe prompts that you might use to explore those values of an individual that you're just meeting for the first time or catching up with after a while?
I think I love this question because I've truly been trying some out, because it's so hard to be like, what are you, some of my like friends are like, what are you being, just to kind of joke. But I love asking people like, what's your life update? Like, how are you feeling about your life these days? Or just like, I've heard like, what's your story? Like, if you're meeting someone new, like, what's your story? Like, tell me about, what you've been up to. And I think just overall, like, it doesn't have to be like, how are you feeling, but just like, what's your life update? Like, what's going on in your world? I really love those kinds of things, because that gives some freedom to talk about, I don't know, or just challenging very directly, like, without telling me about school, without telling me about your job, like, how, like, what are you doing? Or like, what's up with you these days? Kind of even saying like, without focusing on your job or whatever this is, like, tell me
Yes.
about you, like, what's going on with you, because I care and I want to know. And if you're close with that person or whatever that kind of sounds like.
Gosh, and that's brings me even to the idea of how in America, it's really common where we ask the question of how are you? And we ask it very like, you go to the grocery store, "Hey, how are you?" "Good, good." And it's just like this weird, it's a question meant to open a broader conversation that kind of just stops. And, it can also be a question that can also be very triggering outside of just, the identity aspect of, what do you do? It's then, well, how are you? Well, how am I? Maybe I'm not well. Maybe I'm not having a great day or something. And a suggestion I had learned was similar to, asking or finding different ways to ask the, what is your life story? It's, what did you have for lunch today? How was your breakfast? Or something like that. So it's interesting how small prompts can make a big difference in how people view or engage in a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love that. Even just kind of those like smaller questions.
Right.
Just kind of showing interest in some of the little things about people's life could actually really open up doors to great conversations. I really love that. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I want to shift the conversation because something I find interesting that I've learned. Well, no, I can't even say I've learned a lot about her. It's more so that I've seen a lot of conversation around athletes and concussions, even from the student athlete level up to NHL. I mean, it seems like from what I've seen is that it's a problem. It's a problem that is existing in sports culture, and one where it seems to be brushed off a lot. And understanding the idea of performance and get up and brush it off and get back out there, but at the same time these things are having dire repercussions on an individual's health and brain health and total mental health and even a lot of times physical health. So what learnings did you explore there, and maybe what are some of the things that you're seeing that are changing in that aspect?
Yeah, that's such an incredible question, because I don't usually get asked that, but I really like talking about it, because I feel like I've learned so much after being removed. Because when I suffered some of the concussions in high school, my world, and even, in college, but my world was so limited to softball because I had spent a majority of my life playing softball. And so concussions are one of those things where, I went to one doctor and they said I should hang it up. And I went to another and said I don't play a contact sport and I could keep going. And so it's an injury that is so based on what you articulate that you're feeling. And that can really cause you to spiral and like question yourself and question how you're feeling. And even when you're feeling the symptoms so visibly, like it's so obvious, like you start to question, is it because you're making it worse? And so concussions are just so subjective, and it makes it really difficult to make that decision for yourself as an athlete, because whether it's professional, college, high school, like you've spent a majority of your life in this world playing softball or playing a sport. And so it's going to be really difficult for you to make a good decision on whether or not, the hit was too bad and whether or not that hit is going to be worth the rest of your life experiencing those things. And so I think that there definitely needs to be, like, whatever time is like taken off for concussion, like there needs to be more. Like, I just think like the more time to heal is so necessary. And I think documentation, I think in athletics has gotten so good, because when I, towards the end, I had to fill out a form every day of like how I was feeling and certain symptoms and rank them. And so it was something where I could see I'm not getting better. My score is at a certain number, but I also got to a space where I'd had so many where I wasn't going to lie to myself, where beforehand, you could lie and get back on the field. And so, because everybody that you're reporting to reports to that athletic space. And so one of the things that I'm super passionate about kind of looking at is just like, how do you have someone totally removed from athletics, totally, kind of knows you well, to know if you're a little bit different, you're a little bit off still. I think me personally, like having my family, like they just know, like as soon as I get hit or a little bit off, like my aunt just knows, like they can see it in my eyes, they can see it in my words, whatever it is. Having a mental health professional within sports teams is so necessary, because concussions are just, there's no box that they fit in. So it's really up to the athlete to articulate how they're feeling and when they can come back, and, which doctor they should listen to and which advice they should take. And that's too difficult of a decision to make, because of course you're going to be biased towards going back. I'm not saying that you can't recover from it, because it's incredible. I mean, I did, and I'm glad that I kept playing, but to kind of decide, because everyone's so severe, not severe. It's just, I think just the more help that somebody can have on making that kind of decision, it's really hard, because it sits all on you sometimes.
That is fascinating. And so what I'm hearing is that so much of the assessment of coming back or not coming back, that's left up to the athlete based on how they may or may not be feeling. And oftentimes, more than not, athletes are going to want to get back into the game and continue that performance. So I guess in my point, like I was thinking, when you go to the doctor, you get the CAT scan on your brain, or a PET scan. Which one is it? Is it CAT scan?
CAT scan.
CAT scan. They can monitor, and you see very scientifically it's a yes or a no. So that's really interesting to hear. And I guess, like any science, there's always going to be variables in the degrees of different things, but it comes down to how that person shows up. And like you said, your family was one that could tell, because how your mental health may or may not have changed, how they could see it in your eyes. That is, I appreciate that. I appreciate that perspective. And that gives me a lot of a different way to look at this. But, there's so many areas of our mental health system that I really hope has more attention. And I think with athletes and sports performance, being one of them, maybe perhaps there is more programming that can be offered to students or anybody that experiences this, because self-awareness is a hard one, especially when it comes to something that is going on with your emotions, that sometimes it's very hard to be self-aware of. And it takes another degree of doing the work, I think, to understand that. How can counselors, therapists, psychologists, where is there room for them in performance, and how can that be integrated in a way that doesn't feel of like an add-on rather than an integrated aspect to the student athlete experience?
Yeah, I mean, I love that question. I love that question so much too. Yeah, so I really loved our sports psychology staff, and they were incredible at NC State. They were so helpful. But one of the difficult aspects of sometimes, limited sports psychology staff is that they're not with you every day. And so you have to go initiate, having appointments with them and whatever that looks like. And so as amazing as they are and as helpful as they are, a lot of some of the conversations of like mental health or other things fell on our athletic trainer because they were there every day. They knew us, and it was just so easy when we're getting rehab or whatever it was to talk about it. And so something that I'm actually working with some people over at NC State and kind of looking at is the idea of whether it's a counselor or social worker or whatever, some sort of like mental health professional that fills that role of every day with the team, who's there and can kind of, offer that support on a more regular, integrated, like you said, basis, versus an add-on. Because I think it could help a lot with injury decisions or just overall culture and monitoring, the waves of how the athletes are really doing on a daily basis. Because it's also hard, to kind of initiate that sometimes and go seek it. And it is very limited. And there's not a lot of resources for some schools. And I went to a huge school and I'm so grateful for that. And some schools don't have the funding to be able to do that. And so I think just like really pushing the importance of it and integrating it into daily access is just as necessary as athletic training.
So one thing that comes to mind as you say that with the integration and somebody that can be there every day, why not the coach? Why not coaches? Is there opportunity for this sort of training program to be part of the curriculum? Or, I mean, I guess that's what I'm curious about now is, how can coaches serve as at least a counterpart or an advocate to the mental health training of their individual athletes?
I think coaches who are open to growing are fantastic and amazing and who continue to seek the education. I'm a little bit biased because my situation with my coaches was not very good. I mean, they ultimately did not stay with the program. And with my injury, it was just handled with a lot of just harassment and it was just pretty bad. So I'm personally, but I've also had, great coaches who are so respectful of those things. And I think those coaches that I've had before that are just fantastic are the ones that are open to keeping up with new resources and just collaborating with their sports psychology department, collaborating with their athletic trainer. I think there's always going to be a little bit of bias of who that coach wants on the field. And so, health wise, or also, I saw some issues in the softball program where girls would open up to a coach or something, and that would end up, being used against them as they're not mentally fit to play that day or things like that. And so I think that there needs to be a separation between how a coach markets themselves as an open door or willing to talk and like we're family, because sometimes that can get dicey. Like it is totally okay for a coach to have a job and like fill a role, and it doesn't need to be like open door. But if it is open door, to like make sure it's completely safe if it's going to be marketed that way. So I think just the willingness to collaborate with other professionals and like for professionals to understand that coaches do have a job. They have a job to win and like it's their livelihood, and that's a burden for them too. Like for them to have access to psychologists or be encouraged to talk to people about that pressure and the decisions they have to make. It's a really high pressure job. Their job is always on the line based on how they're performing. So to have resources for them is super important. I'm sorry, that's not totally answering to your question of how they serve as resources, but I just think overall,
and there's no right or wrong to that. It's just exploring, is that a possibility? I think you gave two really great perspectives of, yes, they're there for that job. Yes, there could be some undercover biases that come in because they are wanting to be an advocate for that individual's mental health, but then that takes them off the field potentially. But then, hey, those coaches might need some of those resources themselves too.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a
Yeah.
great answer and great exploration on all sides of what that may look like. KELSEY, where can people find you? So if they want to learn more about your story, about what you're doing in the mental health space and social work for, sports and athletes, and even the program that you're building at NC State, tell us where we can find you. Where can people connect with you?
Yes. So right now, you can find me on social media. It's Kels O'Connor 6. And if you do follow me on social media, you can be looking out. I will have a website up in December, and some potential online courses actually for coaches and leaders in sports on my website coming soon.
Love it. KELSEY, thanks so much for joining us and for sharing your story. I know that's a very vulnerable space, but I appreciate you sharing that with our audience. And I hope there's some people out there that will connect with this and contact you. And I wish you the best of success. And I am excited to hear what you do next too.
Thank you so much. You too. Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Take care.